The jungle was a black shroud, thick with the hum of insects and the weight of unseen eyes, when a Japanese saber tore through the tent canvas like a claw through flesh. The blade caught Private John McKinney's ear, slicing deep, and a jolt of agony ripped him from sleep. Blood sprayed across his face, hot and coppery, splattering the rough canvas as he thrashed awake. His eyes flew open, blurry with exhaustion, and locked onto a nightmare. 100 enemy soldiers charging through the pre-dawn mist, their bayonets glinting like shards of broken moonlight. Shadows twisted into shapes, men in tattered uniforms, faces contorted with rage, their voices rising in a guttural howl that shook the earth. McKinney's heart slammed against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat, as he lunged for his M1 rifle. His fingers closed around the cold stock, just as the first wave crashed into the outpost, a tidal surge of steel and death. It was May 11th, 1945, and the war had turned Luzon into a crucible of mud and blood. The Philippines campaign was in its dying throes, but the Japanese clung to the island with a ferocity born of desperation. The U.S. 33rd Infantry Division, a patchwork of weary men, had spent months hacking through jungle and mountain, their boots sinking into soil soaked with the sweat of the living and the dead. McKinney's company, Company B, a ragged band of riflemen and gunners, had fought tooth and nail to carve out this sliver of rest. They'd stumbled into a clearing the day before, a patch of earth ringed by towering trees and choked with vines, and collapsed into tents and foxholes. Sleep came hard, haunted by the crack of rifles and the screams of the fallen. McKinney, a lean 24-year-old from Woodcliff, Georgia, had drawn the short straw for night watch. Hours of staring into the dark, rifle cradled like a lifeline, had left him hollowed out. He'd handed off to Corporal Hayes at midnight, mumbling a tired curse before crawling into his tent. His squad's machine gun nest, a Squad M1919 perched on a tripod, stood 20 yards away, its barrel aimed at the jungle's edge. The perimeter felt solid, until the dawn proved it wasn't. The saber's owner loomed over him, a Japanese NCO with a face like carved stone, eyes blazing with intent. The blade gleamed as it rose again, aimed for McKinney's throat. Instinct took over. He swung his M1 upward, the rifle but smashing into the man's jaw with a crack that split the air. Teeth sprayed like shattered pebbles, and the officer staggered, blood pouring from his mouth in a dark cascade. McKinney didn't stop. He drove the stock down once more, crushing the man's skull with a wet crunch that sent him sprawling into the mud. The tent flaps shredded as more figures burst through, their silhouettes jagged against the faint light. McKinney rolled to his knees, leveled his rifle, and squeezed the trigger. The M1 barked, a sharp thunderclap, and a second soldier dropped mid-lunge, a bullet tearing through his chest. The body hit the ground with a thud, blood pooling beneath it, but there was no time to breathe. More were coming. He stumbled out of the tent, boots slipping on the slick earth, and the full scope of the assault hit him like a punch. Dozens of Japanese infantrymen flooded the clearing, their shouts a wall of sound that drowned out the jungle's hum. Bayonets flashed, rifles cracked, and the air thickened with the acrid bite of gunpowder. The machine gun nest was his squad's anchor, a lifeline against the tide. He saw Private Ellis already there, yanking the M1919's bolt back with a metallic clank, while Corporal Hayes fumbled with an ammo belt, his hands shaking from sleep and fear. McKinney sprinted toward them, his breath a ragged rasp, mud sucking at his heels. But the enemy was faster. A grenade arced through the mist, a black speck against the gray sky, and landed with a dull thump near the nest. The blast was deafening. Orange flame and dirt erupted, hurling Ellis backward. His leg twisted at a sickening angle, blood streaming from torn flesh, and he screamed, a raw sound swallowed by the chaos. Hayes dropped the ammo belt, lunging for Ellis. "Get him out!" McKinney yelled, voice hoarse, but Hayes was already moving, dragging the wounded man toward a cluster of trees. "McKinney, hold M!" the corporal shouted over his shoulder, disappearing into the shadows. Alone now, McKinney reached the nest just as 10 Japanese soldiers swarmed it. They clawed at the machine gun, their hands wrenching the barrel toward the camp, fingers scrabbling for the trigger. His pulse thundered in his ears. He raised his M1 and fired. The rifle spat flame, bullets ripping through the air at point-blank range. One soldier's head snapped back, a red mist bursting from his brow. Another clutched his throat, gurgling as he fell. 3, 4, 5. McKinney kept shooting, each round a heartbeat, until 7 lay in a tangled heap, their blood soaking the earth. The last 3 spun toward him, eyes wide with shock. One swung a bayonet, the blade slashing inches from McKinney's face. He ducked, grabbed the rifle barrel, and yanked the man forward, driving his knee into the soldier's gut. The air whooshed out of him, and McKinney twisted, snapping his neck with a sickening pop. The second lunged, but McKinney pivoted, slamming his rifle but into the man's temple. Bone gave way with a dull thud, and he crumpled. The third turned to flee. McKinney fired once more, the bullet punching through the man's spine, dropping him face-first into the mud. He seized the M1919, its metal scorching his palms, and swung it toward the advancing horde. A burst roared out, tracer rounds streaking red through the mist, cutting a swath through the charging figures. Bodies jerked and fell, their cries swallowed by the gun's chatter. Bullets zipped past him. One grazed his shoulder, a hot sting that drew a hiss through his teeth. Another splintered the tree beside him, showering him with bark. The enemy kept coming, bayonets fixed, voices howling, a relentless wave of steel and fury. Sweat stung his eyes, his ear throbbed with every heartbeat, but he gripped the gun tighter. The clearing was a maelstrom now, a blur of motion and violence, and McKinney stood at its center, alone, unyielding, as dawn broke red over the jungle. The M1919 machine gun bucked in John McKinney's hands, its roar a jagged pulse that tore through the dawn. Tracer rounds streaked red across the clearing, slicing into the wave of Japanese soldiers charging from the jungle's edge. Bodies twisted and fell, dark shapes crumpling into the mud, their screams lost in the thunder of gunfire. Bullets whizzed past his head. One clipped his ear, already slashed and bleeding, sending a fresh spike of pain through him. Another punched into the dirt at his feet, kicking up a spray of earth. He gritted his teeth, sweat streaming down his face, and kept firing until the ammo belt clicked empty, the gun falling silent with a hiss of overheated metal. The enemy didn't stop. Bayonets glinted, voices howled, and the next wave surged closer, a flood of steel and hate. McKinney dropped the useless gun and snatched his M1 rifle from the ground, its stock slick with blood and mud. A soldier burst through the mist, bayonet thrusting for his chest. He sidestepped, the blade grazing his ribs, and swung the rifle like a club. The butt smashed into the man's jaw with a crack that echoed through the trees, sending him sprawling. Another came from the left, rifle raised. McKinney pivoted, drove the barrel into the soldier's gut, and yanked the trigger. The M1 barked, and the man staggered back, a red stain blooming across his tunic. The rifle's clip pinged out, empty, and McKinney cursed under his breath. He hurled the weapon at a third attacker, catching him square in the face, then lunged for a fallen Arisaka rifle lying in the dirt. His fingers closed around the unfamiliar stock just as two more soldiers charged, their bayonets slashing through the air. He rolled, mud coating his back, and fired from his knees. The first shot punched through one man's throat, dropping him in a gurgling heap. The second missed, the bullet burying itself in a tree with a dull thud. The surviving soldier leapt, bayonet aimed for McKinney's heart. He twisted, grabbed the rifle barrel mid-thrust, and pulled hard, dragging the man off balance. His fist slammed into the soldier's nose, cartilage crunching, and he finished him with a savage kick to the skull, boots sinking into flesh. Breathing hard, McKinney scrambled to his feet, the Arisaka trembling in his hands as he scanned the chaos. The clearing was a slaughterhouse now, bodies strewn like broken dolls, blood pooling in the ruts of churned earth. But the enemy kept coming, relentless, their numbers blurring into a tide of motion. 40 yards away, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Two Japanese soldiers knelt in the mist, hunched over a Type 89 mortar. One fed a shell into the tube while the other adjusted the aim, pointing it toward the camp where his company slept, oblivious to the storm. McKinney's stomach clenched. He dropped the Arisaka, its ammo spent, and grabbed his M1 from the mud, shaking off the muck. His last clip, 8 rounds, clicked into place with a metallic snap. He steadied his shaking hands, aimed through the haze, and fired twice. The first mortarman slumped, a bullet through his chest. The second jerked as a round tore into his shoulder, the mortar tipping over with a clang. No shells would fall, not yet. A shout snapped his head around. A Japanese officer, katana raised, led a fresh wave from the trees. The blade flashed as he charged, flanked by 5 infantrymen, their bayonets fixed and gleaming. McKinney fired, dropping one soldier mid-stride, then another, but the clip pinged empty too soon. The officer closed in, katana slashing downward in a silver arc. McKinney dove under it, the blade whistling past his ear, and rolled to his feet, snatching a rock from the ground. He swung it hard, smashing it into the officer's temple. blood sprayed, and the man staggered but didn't fall. McKinney tackled him, driving him into the mud, and wrestled the katana free, plunging it into the officer's side with a wet thunk. The body went limp beneath him. The remaining 3 soldiers rushed him, bayonets thrusting. McKinney yanked the katana free and swung, the blade biting into one man's arm, severing muscle and bone. The soldier screamed, dropping his rifle, and McKinney kicked him aside, turning to meet the next. A bayonet grazed his thigh, hot pain flaring, but he parried with the sword, steel clashing, and drove it through the attacker's chest. The third lunged, and McKinney ducked, tripping him with a sweep of his leg. He stomped down hard, crushing the man's windpipe with a sickening crack. The katana slipped from his blood-slick hands, and he scooped up a discarded Arasaka, its bayonet still attached, as more shadows loomed through the mist. Time blurred into a haze of violence. 36 minutes stretched into eternity. McKinney fought like a cornered animal, every move a dance with death. He stabbed a soldier through the gut, the bayonet sticking briefly before he wrenched it free. Another charged, and he clubbed him with the rifle's stock, shattering teeth and bone. Bullets whined past, one slicing a shallow gash across his forearm, but he barely felt it. Adrenaline burned through him, drowning the pain. A grenade rolled into the nest, hissing smoke. He kicked it away, and it exploded 10 yards off, showering him with dirt and leaves. He grabbed a fallen pistol, a Japanese Nambu, and fired blindly into the advancing line, dropping 2 more before the magazine ran dry. The jungle seemed to pulse with the enemy's fury, their numbers thinning but their desperation growing. McKinney's breath came in gasps, his vision swimming, but he didn't falter. He snatched a bayonet from a corpse and met another wave head-on. 5 soldiers, screaming as they charged. He dodged a thrust, plunged the blade into one man's side, and ripped it free to slash another's throat, blood arcing through the air. The third swung at him. McKinney caught the rifle, twisted it from the man's grip, and drove the bayonet into his chest. The last 2 hesitated, eyes flickering with fear, but he didn't give them a chance. He leapt, tackling one to the ground and snapping his neck, then rose to bury the blade in the other's back. Exhaustion clawed at him, his arms heavy as lead, but the fight wasn't over. He staggered to the machine gun nest, tripping over bodies, and gripped the M1919's barrel, its heat searing his palms. The mist was lifting, dawn painting the sky in streaks of red, and he saw them. Fewer now, but still coming, their silhouettes jagged against the light. He scavenged a half-spent ammo belt from the mud, fed it into the gun with trembling hands, and opened fire again. The chatter of bullets ripped through the air, cutting down 3 more, their bodies jerking like marionettes with severed strings. The rest faltered, their shouts fading into a ragged chorus, and for the first time, McKinney felt the tide shift. He stood there, chest heaving, the gun smoking in his grasp, a lone figure in a sea of carnage, unbroken, unbowed, as the jungle held its breath. John McKinney's hands trembled on the M1919, the machine gun's barrel glowing faintly from the heat of its last burst. Smoke curled from the muzzle, mingling with the mist as the dawn sun bled red across the jungle canopy. His chest heaved, each breath a rasp that burned his throat, and blood dripped from his slashed ear, streaking down his neck to soak his collar. The clearing was a graveyard. 40 Japanese soldiers lay scattered around him, their bodies twisted in the mud, bayonets jutting from the earth like broken teeth. He'd lost count of the kills, the minutes blurring into a storm of gunfire and steel, but the fight wasn't over. Through the haze, 5 more figures emerged, their silhouettes sharp against the rising light, bayonets fixed, faces set with grim resolve. The last wave. He dropped the empty machine gun, its ammo spent, and snatched a blood-slick Arasaka from a corpse, its bayonet still gleaming. The soldiers charged, a tight knot of fury, their boots pounding the earth. McKinney braced himself, legs shaking but firm, and met them head-on. The first thrust came low, aiming for his gut. He parried with the rifle, steel clashing, and drove the bayonet up into the man's chest. The soldier gasped, blood bubbling from his lips, and McKinney yanked the blade free, spinning to face the next. A bayonet slashed toward his face. He ducked, the tip grazing his cheek, and swung the rifle's stock, smashing it into the attacker's skull with a crack that split the air. The man crumpled, lifeless, as the third lunged. McKinney sidestepped, grabbed the soldier's arm, and twisted hard, snapping bone. The man screamed, dropping his weapon, and McKinney silenced him with a thrust to the throat, blood spraying across his hands. The fourth came from behind, bayonet raised. McKinney whirled, tripped him with a kick to the shin, and drove the Arasaka's blade down, pinning him to the ground through his back. The fifth hesitated, eyes wide with something like fear, but McKinney didn't pause. He yanked the bayonet free, charged, and plunged it into the man's gut, twisting until the soldier's legs buckled. The body hit the mud with a wet thud, and silence fell, sharp, sudden, and heavy. He staggered back, the Arasaka slipping from his grasp, and leaned against the machine gun nest. His vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges, but he forced himself to stand. The jungle was still, the hum of insects creeping back as the mist burned away. Bodies littered the clearing, 40 maybe more, a testament to the storm he'd weathered alone. His shoulder throbbed where a bullet had grazed him, his thigh ached from a shallow cut, and his ear pulsed with every heartbeat, but he was alive. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the carnage, and for a moment, McKinney just breathed, the air thick with the stench of blood and gunpowder. Footsteps crunched behind him, slow, tentative. He turned, hand twitching toward a discarded pistol, but it was no enemy. Sergeant O'Malley emerged from the trees, his rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes bleary from sleep. The man froze, mouth falling open as he took in the scene. The sprawled corpses, the bullet-riddled earth, the lone private standing amidst it all, coated in mud and blood. "Jesus Christ," O'Malley whispered, his voice cracking. More figures followed, Corporal Hayes, Private Dunn, a dozen others, stumbling from tents and foxholes, their faces a mix of confusion and dread. They'd slept through it, the roar of battle muffled by exhaustion and the jungle's embrace, and now they stood gaping at the aftermath. What in God's name happened here? Hayes rasped, stepping over a body, his boots squelching in the mud. He clutched a bandage from dragging Ellis to safety, his hands still stained red. McKinney didn't answer right away. He wiped blood from his cheek with the back of his hand, the first rays of sunlight catching the crimson streaks on his skin, and muttered, "They came at dawn." His voice was low, rough, like gravel grinding together, and it carried the weight of the morning. The men gathered closer, their murmurs rising into a stunned chorus. Dunn kicked a fallen katana, its blade dulled with blood, and shook his head. "One man did this?" he said, half to himself. O'Malley knelt beside a corpse, counting the dead with a slow sweep of his eyes, then looked up at McKinney, awe flickering in his grizzled face. "You held the line. All by yourself." It wasn't a question, just a fact, sinking in as the company circled the nest, their boots tracing the edge of the battlefield McKinney had carved out. He didn't respond, just sank to one knee, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the ache of every bruise, every cut. Hayes clapped a hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle, and said, "You saved us, Johnny. Every damn one of us." The words hung there, simple and true, as the men nodded, their silence louder than any cheer. They'd been seconds from slaughter, and McKinney, quiet, unassuming McKinney, had stood between them and oblivion. The sun rose fully now, painting the clearing gold, and the jungle stirred back to life, birds calling, leaves rustling, as if nothing had happened. McKinney looked out at the horizon, past the bodies and the blood, and felt the weight settle on his shoulders, not just of the fight, but of the lives behind him. He'd done what he had to, no more, no less, and that was enough. The company stood watch as medics finally arrived, their voices sharp with urgency, but McKinney stayed still, a lone figure against the dawn, the hero they'd never expected.